Now, to help us go deeper on this subject of adjusting the arena, we have as our guest today Norman Rice, who's former mayor of Seattle and former president and CEO of the Seattle Foundation. Norman, welcome.
Thank you.
So glad to have you here. So we've been talking today about this question of how you change the dimensions of a political arena depending on the cause or the fight that you're involved in. And I know you've got a book coming out pretty soon on your time as both mayor and civic leader here. And one of the signal examples of adjusting the arena came pretty early in your tenure as mayor when you pulled together this citywide education summit. Say a word about why you did that and how you came to make it happen, because then as now, education wasn't really the mayor's job, right? That was the school district's job. How did you decide to kind of crack that open?
What happened was during that campaign for mayor, one of the candidates had supported an initiative to repeal busing in the city of Seattle, which I didn't think was a good policy. And I was waiting for people to challenge that assumption, and nobody was. And I had run for mayor and lost 2 times. So I was run for office, higher office, and hadn't won. So I was like saying, what am I going to do? Finally, about 6 hours before the deadline, I decided to jump in the race and say that there's a chilling effect from this issue of repealing busing, this dividing the city. And we needed to bring people together to heal and to make sure that we challenged that initiative. So I jumped in with 6 hours to go, and I won the race. So I won. Now what do you do?
You won and the initiative passed.
Yes.
So busing ended and you were elected.
I jokingly like to tell people, some people got to vote their hopes and their fears
all
in one vote.
Yeah.
Rarely do you get that opportunity. So we knew we had to do something, and we began to think about what to do. And we called for an education summit. We asked the community to come together to really begin to redefine and talk about what is important in education and how to bring about some consensus around a more positive effort around education.
So this feels to me like this classic case of expanding the arena here, the size of it, because you could have come in and said, hey, I know folks voted to repeal busing, and my job is everything but education, and I'm going to let the school board worry about this stuff. But you said, no, I'm going to actually crack this open apart from what my literal responsibilities are. And out of the summit came not just kind of organizing and listening to people around the community, but in the end, something that's now institutionalized in city life, which is the families and education levy, right? Which became this, say a word about that and how that came to be.
Well, one of the things when you convene, it isn't having a convening saying what's wrong with education. You have to really go to the values that people have and what do they care about education in their children. What's most important to you? You want your children to be safe. You want them to be healthy. You want them to be ready to learn. You want to be making sure you have a structure around them that gives them the environment for a positive education. As you begin to define those kinds of things, you not only just list those things, you reach out to the community to be involved in helping to build a structure. So one of the keys that we had was asking the community and those who were engaged in the Education Summit to continue the dialogue and to build the framework to help us move forward. So we started getting more and more people engaged in education from the bottom up, more people engaged across the board, and by then, they own it. There's a whole line that says, go to the people, listen to the people, build on what they say, and when their job is done, they will say they build it themselves. And we felt that that was going to be the best way. It took a lot of time, but it built the underpinning of my administration for all the things we did, whether it was the comprehensive plan, growth management, other things. How do you engage communities in a most positive way and get them to own it so that they then support it and build? And that led to the Family and Education Levy. And that levy has passed how many times now? So many times I can't believe it. But
renewed over and over. And so in all these cases, actually the other dimensions that we've been talking about today of playing an inside and an outside game and thinking about deeper and shallower levels of power here are all embodied in what you've just described, right? I mean, that kind of outreach, which ended up being not just for the summit and for this levy, but as you say, became the underpinning of how you governed, was this combination of I mean, you were very good at the inside game within City Hall. You knew your your colleagues on the council.
Didn't help me get elected.
Okay, but you knew that game on the
Yes,
inside,
yes,
right?
yeah.
But you also knew how to activate folks in the communities and in the neighborhoods to bypass that inside game when it was needed. In the years since then, you took on a leadership role in philanthropy, running the Seattle Foundation, and I'm wondering what kinds of lessons got transferred there. Philanthropists and people in philanthropy aren't politicians in the same way, but you are civic catalysts, right? And these same questions of how do you size the field, how do you change the terms around people think they're engaging. How did you adjust the arena when you were in that role?
Well, one of the things that we came up with was the whole notion of the healthy communities. Philanthropists, it's their money. It's what they want to do with their money. So we can't just say, can I have your money now? Can we spend it on the things that the foundation has? Really building a framework that gives the philanthropists choices. So the healthy community framework that came out of the foundation was a lens in which philanthropists could look at and say, okay, I can go here, I can go there. And then you make sure that you are training your staff to be able to give people choices. Because at the end of the day, most people want to choose. They don't want to be told what to do. They want to choose. So give them an array, developing forums, developing places where those discussions can go on so that people can see the choices they have and the places they can invest in.
So when the Seattle Foundation, under your tenure, laid out this Healthy Communities framework, it had, as I recall, several kind of core areas around, again, youth and education and safe spaces and the rest, family and so forth. And like what you had done as mayor around education, you were leading with values, it seems like, right? You were leading with a set of values that people could debate or kind of develop consensus around. And once you had enough buy-in there, then you could kind of say, okay, now we're going to operationalize these values. But anytime you have a complaint or a dissent about stuff, I'm going to keep coming back to the values piece of this, right? Do you feel like in our politics today, our culture today, it's still possible to lead in this manner? Or are the values themselves so contested and hot button topics that you can't even move out of that now?
I think you can do it, but you've got to invest in the time to listen. And I think that's what most people do. We still have this idea, let's have a meeting, let's have a hearing, let's get some input. Now let's go back. And here's
do what
the
we
plan.
wanted to do. Yeah.
And the real issue is really getting people to say, will you help me? You have to have the community see that they're building it rather than being told. Just having a hearing and getting a lot of input and then walking away and now say, here it is, that isn't going to go anywhere. I mean, whether I don't know if I have a solution to every new problem I see, but even with the whole notion of juvenile justice in the Justice Center, and I'm not trying to solve that problem, but there's a bigger issue going on. Mm-hmm. And until you can show people you heard what's the bigger issue around there, then you can't really get to the solution of the Justice Center. So what's happening with youth? What's happening with detention? What are the kinds of tools you need to start to intervene? They aren't all in the center. There are other places. So can you ask those who are activists and others to help you build that roadmap in order to make those interventions? Once you do that, then you might be able to listen to people, and people might be able to listen to you rather than just saying, it's this or that. And that's a longer thing. We spent with the Education Summit, we had people coming back and said, this is what I thought you said. Did you? And then we asked for validation of those things. We took a long time to make sure that we heard you.
Well, it's this very wise counsel, and the title of your forthcoming book is Soul of a Messenger, which describes your arc of public life and your entry into both politics and philanthropy. But I would say, actually, listening to you here, that core to this work of being effective as a civic change maker is also just having the soul of a listener. And you really have embodied that all your career. Norman Rice, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
It's been great to have you.